Whew, cataloging all these new monsters is tough work. Let's see what we have next. The Overmind. Overmind, what kind of name is that? Must be some wizard that thinks they're the smartest in the multiverse. I haven't met one of those before. You know, I bet this Overmind character really isn't all that, but they're just some nobody that shows a cool... Oh, god damn. Flea Mortals is a monster book by MCDM. This is the company's third full book release, the previous two being generally well received. This book promises to deliver a more fun, engaging set of core monsters for 5e. The folks working on this are numerous, but some names you might recognize from MCDM are, of course, Matt Colville, James Introcaso, and Grace Chung. All three I'm a big fan of, and some other names you might know that worked on as designers on this product are Teo Sabadia, Willia Beal, Mackenzie DeArmas, Gabe Hicks, Scott Fitzgerald Gray, Jessica Markrum. Okay, I couldn't possibly point out all the all-stars on this credit list. I mean, look at this roster of designers. Some heavy firepower behind this book, and it shows. Up front, I love this book. It's perfect for me. It feels like it was written for a DM like me. But let's talk about it and see if it's a good fit for you. So first, the introduction. It contains a plethora of new rules and tweaks to the combat system. If you like 4E, you'll feel right at home. But please don't write it off because I said that. The most obvious re-addition and tweaking are creature roles. Creature roles are essentially a label that give you an idea on how to run the monster, and mixing creatures of different roles is meant to help you create fun and exciting encounters. Now, arguably, 5e dropped the roles for a reason. For example, 4e has the Lizardfolk Bogwalker with the Soldier role, and Lizardfolk Mere Scout with the Skirmish role. Now, the former has only melee attacks, while the Scout has a weaker claw attack and a primary ranged attack. This very quickly lets you know the Bogwalker is meant to go up to enemies in melee and hold the line, while the Skirmish is meant to hit and run with the ranged attacks. Now take the 5e Lizardfolk. It can replace both of these creatures with multiple melee attacks and a ranged attack. It's up to the DM to read the stat block and utilize the one 5e Lizardfolk in multiple roles. Now this design is flexible and I think it's good. I just like the creature roles better. The monsters in this book also follow slightly different rules as far as spellcasting goes. They continue the recent design trend to do away with spell slots on stat blocks under the DM's purview, and instead giving them an ability or spell that they can use X amount of times per day. There are also just a bunch of few small tweaks to language that are similar to a keyword-ish system, such as save ends, that MCDM has used an example that saves space on stat block. There are also rules for action-oriented design that I enjoy, and we'll link to a Matt Colville video where he discusses this. Essentially, for big bosses, MCDM adds villain actions that are similar to, but more powerful than, legendary actions. They're also more limited and typically done once a combat for the really big ones. This design is one of the main selling points of the book, but it's so chock full of content and I can't do it as much justice as the designer themselves, so link in the description. Speaking of chock full, there are a couple more sets of rules and new stuff, such as a companion system, which is an extension of MCDM's Beastheart custom class design, and the retainer system, which is updated from their previous book, Strongholds and Followers. The book also has their own version of minion rules, which if you're unfamiliar, were in 4E and were meant to empower the player by having their PC wade through droves of enemies and feel extra heroic. These minion rules are good. It was sort of hard for me to judge because they're already so similar to the way I run minions, and of course I think that way is the best. But if you're new to minions, you can also check out a video of MCDM's description of their minion design, which I will link in the description. There is also a section on encounter building. We all know the Adventuring Day is hard to balance around the PC's powers, and this section offers guidance on how to wrap your head around it with a little more concrete guidelines. I believe Mike Shea, who has done a lot of thinking and writing on this topic, consulted on this section, and it shows. It's not entirely Shea's design and ideas, but it is heavily influenced, and I'm certain there will be plenty of people that find this section useful. And then we are 4 minutes into this video, and that was just the introduction. This book is thick. It's 400 pages, and the physical copy, I can tell you, is heavy. This is pushing the boundaries of what you can print in a single book, which is why we get Evil Lives, the companion to Flea Mortals, which we will be talking about in a later video. So Chapter 1, the actual monsters. There are 340 stat blocks in this book. For context, I believe the Monster Manual has 450, and the Monsters of the Multiverse contains 261 stat blocks. But trust me, this is not quantity over quality. And actually, there is a spreadsheet to help you organize and filter stat blocks. It's free and open for anyone. Link in the description. And if I have to give the highlight for me about the monsters here, to encapsulate what this book is about and why I have so many positive things to say, I would turn to the Fiends section. When you look at the normal Fiends for 5e, you will have a hard time differentiating between a demon and a devil. In my view, the chaotic alignment of demons and the lawful alignment of devils should be reflected in their physical design. The lawful devil should look largely humanoid, and the chaotic demon should look like a chaotic creature, much less humanoid and much more bestial. This, in addition to their physical design, should make them feel distinct from each other. And the design here accomplishes that. It makes me feel like I'm running a distinct demon and a distinct devil. There's no confusing them. For instance, let's take the demon, which also shows that MCDM is not afraid to add tiny mechanics to just one creature type. Demons have a soul-devouring mechanic. To summarize, the demon will start with a number of souls, which you can take the average for or roll for, similar to hit points, and these souls will power their abilities. It's obviously very similar to the do X ability number per day design, but it's still different because it's a pool. Yes, it's a little more overhead because it's another resource I have to track, but it is very simple. All I have to do is deprecate it, and it makes for fun, distinct design. I'm never going to be confused again if I'm running a devil or a demon. And besides chapter 1 stat block, there's still 3 more chapters that we have to get through. So let's go through them, and then we get to wrap up and final thoughts. Chapter 2 offers a section on environments and generic lair actions for any creature that calls a particular environment its home. For instance, I could give the following lair action to a local denizen of a cave. Or perhaps one of your enchanted forest is becoming overgrown by scarlet rot, and then you get the rot beast, which is essentially a storytelling mechanism. Chapter 3 offers something that is a common piece of advice, but I don't ever recall seeing it written down in a product, and that is rival parties, called here villain parties. These are NPC enemy parties that are meant to both mirror and juxtapose the heroes and, hopefully, have the climactic confrontation at the end of an adventure. The final chapter is on psionic powers, and I won't comment too much on this because frankly I've literally never used psionic abilities. And these are abilities that are meant to be used with a talent, a character class from MCDM, which is actually not out at the time of this writing, and while Pippy is an expert in psionics, I am not, and Pip can't read comments, so it's been tough for him to go over. So I will refrain from judgment on this section, which is fine because the book is already chock full of content, but this is the knock I have on this book, is this does feel out of place, and I don't feel like I can talk about it because the class isn't even out. However, just from following this Kickstarter, it does seem like this was something people wanted. And they delivered, so I don't know if I can complain. But conclusion and final thoughts. So the main idea of this book is to simplify to complexify. MCDM opts to add new rules, but takes a sort of keyword, sort of standardizing approach, and when things are typically true, they just say, hey, here's a rule that says X and Y are always true, so we don't have to clutter up the stat block. A good example of this approach is the unusual nature trait, which appears on a large amount of official stat blocks that tells you that a creature doesn't require some combination of air, food, and or sleep. And in this book, they just put it in a rule that says X creature type doesn't need air, food, or sleep. While 5e attempts to make every single stat block self-contained, where everything is there for a DM, except spellcasting, MCDM trusts the DM to know a few rules and truths, not feeling the need to spell everything except spellcasting out. And when spellcasting does appear on a stat block in this book, it continues the way of presenting spellcasters where they're pared down and not tracking spell slots. A good bit of design that I do not mind keeping at all. However, I do not mean to give the impression that these stat blocks are simple. They just adopt a way of telling you information efficiently and quickly. These stat blocks are chunky, typically 1 or 2 abilities that will do a lot. They're very dynamic, and that's the internal struggle when generating a monster. You have to balance speed and simplicity with interesting and dynamic abilities. And I would not recommend you pick up these monsters in the middle of a game to throw them at the party. You will typically need to read ahead and plan an encounter. So if you are a heavily improvisational DM, you might want to skip this. But if you're not, and hey, even if you want to dip your toes into tactically minded gameplay, this supplement will serve you well. It will typically be best for you to utilize the creature rules, read ahead, think about each creature and their creature type and the upcoming encounter and their abilities in those contexts. And that's kind of how this book is meant to be used. However, much of the design is intuitive. It's fun and interesting, and for me personally, matches my design style and the way I play. I'm going to be using this book for years to come, but it may not be for everybody, but I do think it's for most people. So who is this product for and who is this not for? You should pick this up if you are a veteran DM and you've run 5e for many years and are tired of the same old monsters. If you are tactically minded or wish to try to be tactically minded and you enjoy challenging your party and you like impactful boss battles. If you stripped everything out except the big bad action-oriented monsters, you'd have an excellent book of boss battles, including fun minion rules. But you should avoid this product if you are a highly improvisational DM and a DM that doesn't have too much focus on combat and prefer it to be very quick and very simple. And that was our review. Thank you for watching and listening. I hope you enjoyed it. This is a good product. This also isn't sponsored. I don't know if I'm supposed to say that up front, but I didn't. I'm new to this. I apologize. Thanks for coming.